Welcome back. First week of July 2024, and by the time this video goes live, we should have a new government here in the UK, so a time of change. And 1998 had its share of political change too. The signing of the Good Friday Agreement in April that year, signalling the end of the Troubles, the cessation of violence by Republican terrorists, peace in Northern Ireland. For me personally, the big change this year, I started playing music with other people. I'd had a few abortive attempts at this during my college days, but nothing had ever worked out. And in all honesty, studying for a science degree, time was a big limiting factor. But emboldened this year, I put a want ad up in a few places, the local venue, a guitar shop or two. I'm a bit fuzzy on the details, to be honest. But what do you know? Things started happening. I heard from a guitarist, Glenn, and we met up and started working on ideas, getting to know each other, all the usual stuff. He'd spent a little time playing in an early incarnation of the band Kato, who you may have heard of, and had left because of the usual difficulties, personalities, ideas, egos. It's rock and roll, man. You know how it goes. Anyway, at a Mogwai and Ariel M gig in February of that year, Glenn and I met drummer Charlie, another recent Kato casualty, and ex of mid-90s Norwich Noisenicks Waddle. And all of us being into similar stuff, we arranged to meet up and jam. So it began. Charlie had obliging friends out in the North Norfolk sticks with space to rehearse for free, to make noise. And one of those mates, Luke, wandered in and picked up a bass for those first practices. And like that, he was in. The band was Alnico. That's me, Glenn, Charlie, Luke. All of us into the same kind of music. The instrumental US groups at the time, Slint, Codeine, Jesus Lizard, all the Albini things. We practiced as often as we could, weekly maybe, and we made our live debut at a kind of semi-regular outdoor party happening that summer called Deanstock. Playing to a live audience for the first time, yeah, it was pretty nerve-wracking for me, but this was as relaxed an audience as you could hope for, chilling out on a midsummer evening, campfires, beers, yeah, not too shabby. Fast forward to the end of that summer, we were practiced a bit more and good enough to bag our first local gig. It was the 7th of September 1998 at Fat Paulies, the temporary home for Wild Club during renovations that had closed the Norwich Arts Centre for a year or so. Fat Paulies, yeah, like Spinal Tap's Electric Banana Club, don't go looking for it, it's long gone. We were bottom of a 4-band bill, opening up for Magoo and a then little-known Irish-Scottish indie band called Snow Patrol. I remember very little of this gig, to be honest, other than my guitar strap slipping off mid-song on one number, me gamely kind of cradling it through to the conclusion, inching ever floorwards. But yeah, my first band, our first gigs, that was my 1998. Onwards then with some notable albums from this year that tickled my fancy along the way to this year's big choice. First up, one I've talked about previously and which would probably be my pick for 98 if I could be certain I'd actually heard it this year. Yeah, this is the self-titled debut album from Mark Hollis of Talk Talk. This also, of course, being his final recording. And for me, it's every bit the equal of Laughingstock and Spirit of Eden. It might even just shade them both for me. I do waver on this one. Stillness and space and broad spectrum dynamics unheard of outside of classical recordings on this album. Check out my thoughts on it here. An album whose shadow lengthens with age. Just a spectacular recording. Also, Deserter's Songs by Mercury Rev. A big record for them this year. A dramatic stylistic shift into billowing, soft focus cinematic symphonies. I hadn't reached for this one in quite a long time, but a replay reminded me that A, it's rather good, and B, how ubiquitous this album was in 1998. And yes, it's a different Mercury Rev, but a nice different, I think, on reflection. I went pop last year and it felt good. So how's about this one? This is Ray of Light by Madonna. The whole cycle of reinvention gets a bit wearing with pop colossi. Like Madge, I'll give you that. But this one, almost entirely down to the William Orbit influence, I'll let you decide. Well, this one, it deserves at least a respectful nod. As pre-millennial A-pop album as you'll find, it's the hits, stupid. The title track, Frozen, Substitute for Love. If you grew up in the 80s, Madonna meant something to you. Pop star, crush, feminist icon, it girl, all of the above. But Ray of Light is a reminder that she still had some tunes in the tank after a bit of an early 90s lull. I went Viva Dixie back in 96, but this one needs holding up too. This is Good Morning Spider by Sparkle Horse. More of that same, lovely fractured Twilight Zone Americana here. Painbirds, St. Mary, Hundreds of Sparrows, the willfully obfuscated rocker Happy Man, and one of my favourite cover versions of all time in Mark's take on Daniel Johnston's Hey Joe. My wife prefers this one, and she is usually proved correct in the long run, so, keep that in mind. I also did a bunch of 1998 albums in the 90s Overlooked Underheard series, thumbnails over there. One of those might be missing, but I couldn't possibly comment on that right now. Some others. I featured the Van Pelt last year, and this year Chris Leo and Toko Yasuda splintered off and created The Lapse, releasing their debut LP, Betrayal. A true 90s deep cut, this one. The Van Pelt, but more of everything. Structurally more adventurous, lyrically more abstract and askance, and Toko given freer rein to go off in her own direction. You get Infinite Me, Mentabolism, Consent, and We Must Move Backwards to Progress. A skewed, unpredictable, low-key indie rock masterclass. This one's ripe for rediscovery. Also, Arab Strap's second album, the acidly confessional Philophobia. A more musical, more cohesive record than the debut maybe, but every bit as raw and bruised and ugly. The slap-in-your-face opener are Packs of Three. And now that's how you begin an album. The gently climbing reveal of the beautiful Here We Go, and the poisonous revelations and renunciations of Piglet. Typically strong stuff, this. Skeletal, bleak, nowhere to hide stuff, with a blackly humorous undercurrent. And the last of these, June of 44, and 4 great points. A little less jazz odyssey than 1999's Anna Hatter, and probably all the better for it. Which is to say that this album pitches up perfectly between the band's cut-up riffing style and their newfound trixier, dubbier instincts. There's the woozy, haranguing seesaw of Dexterity of Luck, the heaving eruptions and thunderous drum breaks of Cut Your Face, the undulating hiss and stumble of Air No. 17. Maybe not my favourite 44 is all I'll say, but a perfect starting point for newcomers. And so, the elephant in the room, that 90s OU entry, I was so keen to brush past. Yeah, for the first time, I'm going to say something for the second time. But some messages bear repeating, especially for a record as slept on as this one nowadays. My choice for 1998 is Bedhead and Transaction de Novo. One of the albums from this year that I remember some of the other guys in the band liking just as much as I did. So consider this a group choice if you like. Others of this period I remember us bonding over. I mentioned it last time out. Trans Am's Surrender to the Night. That Ariel M debut. Dianogues As Seen From Above album. Action Park, of course. Spiderland, duh. June of 44, ditto. Yeah, we were all pretty much on the same page, I think. But Transaction de Novo, the slowest, most deliberate of all those, and maybe the apotheosis of the whole late 90s slowcore sound. And a detour about genre here, slowcore, post-rock, lo-fi. Useful in a lazy shorthand sense to get a snapshot of what you're talking about across to someone. But these felt less associative at the time. Alternative, indie, was a broad church. It felt like the need to categorise, to label, wasn't quite the imperative it is nowadays. There's probably a decent paper in there somewhere about the rise of genreification around the time of MP3s emerging as the musical format of choice. What with the need to catalogue, to tag increasingly large digital music collections. In fact, being honest, I still feel an involuntary shudder when uttering the words indie rock. It's not a phrase I or anyone I know used back in 98, but a ubiquitous convenience nowadays that people just seem to get. Digression over. This album, this band, I hear some of the warmth that velvety haze of Galaxy 500, maybe the OGs of slowcore. A sound that's less concerned with the mathy certainties of a band like Codeine. Yeah, all exactingly mapped beats and vertiginous gaps. Much more concerned with slowly evolving melodic constructs, emerging dynamics over plotted ones. No loud, quiet stomp on the fuzz for the chorus here. These are meticulous songs, melodies resolving through the meeting of guitar parts over time. You could almost arrange these songs for a single guitar. Such is the space and separation afforded each player. Yeah, listen to the first half of More Than Ever for a textbook demonstration. But to do that would be missing the point entirely. It's this stealthy accumulation of notes and clusters, often simple one-finger runs, sometimes chords, triads, that Bedhead perfect here on Transaction de Novo. Illustrated nowhere better than Parade. 5 minutes of peaking and plateauing figures building up from sleepy to engulfing. There's a magician's sleight of hand going on here. You never detect the palming of the coin, making that shiny reveal all the more surprising. What is it in the way these parts of Matt and Bubba and Tench interlock just so that makes this stuff work so well? But check this out. There's a link in the description. It's an unpublished book by LeVine, interviewing various musical types during a 6-week road trip across the States in the early noughties. Chapter 7 features Bubba Cadane from Bedhead. Back in Matt and Bubba's early musical days, late 80s, just pre-Bedhead really, they played in a trio with an old school friend and were supplemented for a while by a fiddle player. That was Marty McGuire, who went on to play with, of all people, the Dixie Chicks. Some of the earliest Bedhead songs, Dead Language for instance, took Marty's violin melodies and transposed them across to guitar. And it's this adaptation of parts for violin, viola, cello into a 2, then a 3 guitar setup that inspired and came to define the Bedhead sound. And you can hear that plain as day on Transaction de Novo. The lapping, waltzing parts of the gorgeous Lepidoptera. The skipping rhythms and semi-resolving cycles of Half Thought. And right there at the end, in closing track, The Present, ghostly feedback tones echoing the drawn-out bowed sustain of a cello, underpinning the melody, and a scouring figure emerging in the last few minutes, a pure fiddle bowing part, all grating, round-wound string noise. And I think I'll leave it there. What's more to say? Again, a beautiful record, their Bedhead sign-off, and one of those perfect 37-minute albums. Yeah, bang in that 35 to 45-minute Goldilocks zone. And maybe the Goldilocks analogy works for Bedhead too, themselves, in that dreaded genre sense. Yeah, slow, but never too slow. 3 guitars, but space for everyone, never overcrowded. And carefully written and arranged, but never fussy or showy sounding. Just like that third bed, not too hard, not too soft, just right. So 1998 and Transaction de Novo. We all kind of loved this in the band, and I found it quite an inspiring record. Quite simple, but a lot going on. I've been trying not to repeat myself by selecting records that I've talked about before in this series, but in this case, there was no alternative. It was going to be this one. You have no such excuses. Why don't you tell me what your choice for 1998 would be, and we can talk about it down below. As ever, you've got this far, why not do something for me now? You could give this video a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it, and if you've not already subscribed, well, think about doing that right now. But I will call time right there. Please do take care, and I hope to see you again very soon on the channel. Bye for now.